For a lot of autistic people, establishing and maintaining routines is an incredibly important part of daily life, and Andy is certainly no different. On today's Parenting Autism video, we are going to be exploring routine, specifically Andy's routines. Hello folks, and welcome back to another episode in the Parenting Autism series. My name is Kevin Chapman. My son Andy is 14, he has autism, and in this series we do deep dives on certain aspects of being a parent of somebody with autism and just go through what life is like for us, for him, really dig into some of these topics and take a lot of your questions and experiences on the topics as well. If that sounds like something you'd be interested in, make sure you hit that subscribe button, turn notifications on, all that good stuff. There's about 8 or 9 videos in this playlist now. We're doing it once a week at the moment, so you want those notifications on to make sure you don't miss out on future episodes. Plus, I always announce the topic midweek over on our community page. If you've got your notifications on, you'll be notified when that happens. You get your opportunity to ask your questions, and then they're more likely to be featured in upcoming episodes. So as we've been trying to do over the last couple of these, rather than me waffling on for ages before we get into the questions, we're just going to dive straight into the questions. I always promise I'll try not to make this a real half-hour long monster, and it always ends up nearly there. You can already see how long the episode is. I'm going to try and keep it brief, but as ever, we've got a lot of questions. We haven't been able to get through them all. If we haven't managed to answer your question this time, please don't be put off from asking questions on future topics. It's just, there's only so many questions we can fit into a topic as big as this one. So, getting straight into it, what's Andy's morning routine and how does he react when we change it? His morning routine, and it's the perfect time to talk about it because he goes back to school in like 2 days' time, and one of the ways we got him back to school is really, really tightening up on his morning routine so that going to school is a non-negotiable part of his morning routine. So Andy's morning routine doesn't necessarily start exactly when he gets up because he gets up at different times every day. He's not that bothered about what time he gets up. He tends to get up when the sun comes up or near that. So in the summer he's getting up super early, well before we are. In the winter sometimes we have to wake him up, but the routine itself usually starts about 7 a.m. when he'll have his breakfast, and those of you who haven't watched any or many of our videos in the past will be appalled at what he has for breakfast. We've done videos explaining his diet and why this is what he eats. Believe me, we know it's not ideal, but he'll have 3 or 4 bags of salt and vinegar crisps and a can of Diet Coke as his breakfast. He usually empties them all onto his plate in one go and just eats. That's a new part of the routine. That's something that's kind of come in over the last year or so since he fell out with the bags. He had an issue with the packets. He used to eat his crisps out of the bag. He had an issue with the packets, didn't eat crisps for a few days and maybe a couple of weeks even, and in the end we got round it by emptying the plates onto the plate. But now he estimates before he starts how many bags he wants and empties them all onto the plate in one go, and then if he doesn't finish them all he puts them in the bin. Again, not ideal, but at least he's eating again. So he'll have a few bags of crisps, he'll have his can of Coke, not Coke Zero, Diet Coke, caffeine-free Diet Coke. We have won some of the battles when it comes to his diet, and he'll have Channel 4 on the TV, the Channel 4 morning shows. He'll put that on himself, even if all throughout the summer holidays he's come down and put Channel 4 on the TV, even though he's not been going anywhere, he's not been following his normal strict routine. But then about 8ish, it's usually between an episode of whatever's on before Everybody Loves Raymond and Everybody Loves Raymond itself on Channel 4, which I think starts at 8. It could be at 20 to 8. We basically, rather than following the clock, we're following the Channel 4 morning schedule because that's just how we kind of fell into doing it. He'll have his medicine, so he'll take his medicine and a little syringe into his mouth, and then he has Dr. Pepper as his reward for having that, so he'll have a can of Dr. Pepper as well, which he'll usually only have like 1 sip of in the morning, then leave it on his table and drink it when he gets home from school flat and warm, because I guess he prefers it that way. I don't know, but that's what he does. And then he gets dressed, then he waits for the end of the episode of Everybody Loves Raymond, which is about 8:30 in the morning, and then he knows that when that episode ends, the TV goes off, his shoes go on, and within the next 10 minutes or so, at some point in that period of time, his taxi will arrive and he'll go off to school. So it's not a particularly complicated routine, but it's one that works and one that he should just follow straight on with when we get back to school on Tuesday, because He knows that as soon as that episode finishes, the TV goes off, shoes go on, he goes to school. There isn't a point in that process where there's other options. It's all just routine stuff. And that was a massive part of getting him to go back to school. How long did it take Andy to adjust to me having an input on his daily life? We're going to touch on this a few times. There's a few questions that sort of touch on this topic. So I'll get my thoughts on it out there now so I can then refer back to them. I don't think Andy pays any attention to any other people when he's putting his routines together, when he's establishing his day, when he's working out what he enjoys, what he wants to do. The fact that there's other people in the room is completely irrelevant to him, because one of the other questions that we get later on, in fact, future Kev, bring that question forward. Someone asked how he's coping with the change of routine with Anna going to work, and with Anna starting uni last year and going back to uni and that changing his routine. And the honest answer is, Anna going to uni didn't change his routine. Anna starting work hasn't changed his routine. Me becoming a part of his life hasn't changed his routine, because his routine doesn't include other people. His routine is just what he does. It doesn't matter who's in the room with him. He knows that when he gets to 8:30, the TV goes off, shoes goes on, and he goes to school. It doesn't matter if it's Anna. It doesn't matter if it's me. I kind of think it wouldn't matter if it was a complete stranger, because he knows what he does. And as long as there's somebody passing him his shoes and somebody telling him, taxi's arrived, Andy, I think he'd just go about his normal business, because the routine is more important than the people that he's doing it with. So yeah, it didn't faze him in the slightest, having this handsome bearded man appear as part of his life when he was like 7 or 8 years old. Hannah wants to see the board which we use Andy to show him what we're doing each day. I have the board here. Now the board is very simple. It's not anywhere near as complex as what they do at school, because we try and keep it really simple so that each day just has one thing to describe it. What's the key part about the day? So the key parts are, he understands the word holiday. He knows holiday means he's not at school on a normal school day. He knows if it says school, where are we? He knows if it says school, he's at school those days, and he knows what the weekend is as well. If we were doing something on the weekends, like if we were going to go to, I don't know, say if we were going to Nottingham that Saturday, we'd cross out weekend or rub weekend off and replace that with Nottingham, so he could prepare himself for going to Nottingham. Around about the time when he was going to, when we went to Blackpool, we'd have Blackpool blocked out on there as the description of that day rather than holiday. So whatever the big important thing that he needs to know that day is what gets written on the board. And the board is really just about reminding him when he goes to school, so that he goes to school. Before we had this, school was always a battle, and it was like it was always a surprise. But because he's had this, as soon as we got to Monday of this week and school started to appear again next week, he's been saying school on Tuesday. He knows he goes back to school on Tuesday. He's looking forward to it. He knows it's part of his routine. He would now be more distressed at not going than he will be at going, I think. But that's the very basic version of the board that we use. We did try and use something a little more complex. I will grab it. So we tried a couple of different things before we settled on the board. The first one, was this the first one? I think we had the previous year's version of this. This is from Tiger, which is one of my favourite shops. And it just breaks the whole year down into months and days. You can see I now use this because I think this is brilliant. I actually use this instead of a diary or a notice board that I used to have before. But it spreads the whole year out into weeks and allows you to write a lot more information. So we used to write on there about school plus dentist plus, we'd try and plan his day out a little bit more, but it was too overwhelming, it was too much information, so we abandoned that idea and moved on to this, which we found, I think this was from WH Smith, which is like a little post-it notepad. So these are all sticky notes, individual sticky notes that break it down into weeks, and then we use this so that we had the days of the week, and then we'd have this week, next week, maybe the week after, perhaps go 3 weeks out, and just break it down much more simpler. So it was similar to how the big board worked: school, weekend for the next couple of weeks. And that worked really well. The only problem was, because it was small and because it was little sticky notes, they would get lost, that he wouldn't be able to read them from far away. So we just took that idea and made it bigger with the board. We actually bought a blank notice board to begin with and tried to make one ourselves, and it was a disaster. But then we found this in a warehouse shop and it was perfect. And that's worked for like a year now. It's a brilliant thing. How would Andy react to a surprise holiday? I think if it was for something that he would want to do, he would be all for it. So the example used in the question is a Premier Inn. If I was to go in there now and say, right, Andy, we're going to go to Nottingham and stay in a Premier Inn tonight, he would be absolutely fine. He would get his shoes on and get in the car. If I was to walk into the house and say, right, Andy, we're flying to New York tonight, he would refuse. So if it's something that he would want to do without having, he knows what it is, he understands what it is, and he knows he enjoys it, he'll just do it at the drop of a hat. If it's something that he needs to research, like when we went to Blackpool, we couldn't have just said, right, we're going to Blackpool now. He would have hated it. He had to have that month, 6 weeks to really research Blackpool, plan what he wanted to do while he was there, and then enjoyed it. So yeah, if it's a surprise holiday to somewhere new, it would be a disaster. But if we said to him now, should we go back to Blackpool today? He would say, yeah, and we'd just go. If we weren't to give Andy plenty of notice to go back to school and told him on the day, would he end up like he was 18 months ago? I don't think we'd get quite as bad as things were 18 months ago. I know you've all seen last year's back to school video, which by no means was as bad as things got. That was just the one time we shared it. Things had been a lot worse than that for the 18 months previously. But I think even if we didn't use the board, if we hadn't have mentioned it to him, I think he'd have kind of worked it out himself roughly when he was going back, and probably would go anyway because he's looking forward to going back, but it's not a risk that we want to take. So it's better to give him the week and a half, 2 weeks notice so he can really get his head around the fact that he's going back, knows what day it is, he's fully prepared for it. And like I say, he now wants to go, he's looking forward to going back. Whereas if we were just to walk into the house now and say, right, Andy, today's a school day, as much as he wants to go back to school, that would probably really stress him out because he already has plans that he's made for today. He knows we're going out into town later to go to see some churches, to do a bit of clothes shopping for him. He knows what the plan for today is, so if it just changed like that, he wouldn't like it at all. Did Andy have a routine to go and see Mammar, and has it changed since she passed? Yeah, and you might have noticed, because, I mean, we didn't notice until, I think it was like a couple of days ago, me and Anna were talking about this, and we just realised we haven't been to Nottingham at all since Anna's mum died, since we went for the funeral. Normally we take Andy to Nottingham to do his normal Nottingham routine of trams and stuff. We take him to do that every school holiday, and we haven't been at all over the summer holidays. It's not, we didn't make that conscious decision not to go, but I think subconsciously we knew that it would be hard because part of that routine was always we'd go ride the trams, then Andy and Anna would get on the bus and ride the bus to Anna's mum's house, and then we'd go and spend some time there, and I'd drive the car out to meet them, and we'd hang out there for an hour or two. And I think we've kind of subconsciously just not planned a trip because we don't know how we're going to change that routine. Andy will still expect to ride the bus out to her mum's house, and obviously she's not there, and that, yeah, it's something we haven't done yet and we know we need to do. Realistically, it probably won't be until half term in October now, because unless we do it at a weekend, but weekends get pretty full for me at this time of year, so it might be that it doesn't happen until October. And it could end up being a good thing because he's been so used to doing it on a regular routine, and now the fact that he doesn't do that anymore probably helps him understand the fact that something has changed. She's not coming back, etc., etc. We'll see how it goes when we actually come around to doing it, though. I imagine he's still going to want to ride the bus somewhere because he likes riding the bus. How does routine change in the holidays to when it's school time? The morning routine that we talked about before doesn't really change at all. He still gets up at the same time. He still does the same things. He still puts Channel 4 on. The one thing he doesn't do is he doesn't turn the TV off, and he doesn't put his shoes on. So he knows that and it's something you will have seen in videos from time to time. Probably a while ago now. We've not mentioned it for a long time. But he... one of the things when we're talking to him about holidays, if we tell him he's on holiday next week, he says, holiday, watch Frasier, because Frasier is the programme that's on after Everybody Loves Raymond in the morning on Channel 4. So he knows if he gets to watch Frasier, then it means he's not going to school that day. So the routine changes in so much as the TV doesn't go off, he watches Frasier instead, and then it goes off and he goes about the rest of his day, but he still has to have his Channel 4 morning routine. Bedtime routine still stays exactly the same. So I don't know if we've got a question about bedtime routine actually, but that's his other big routine that is kind of unchangeable. He'll play whatever game he's enjoying at the moment on our TV. It's the only time he gets to play on the big telly. At the moment it's Lego City Undercover on, I think it's on PS4. He's already played it all the way through on the Wii U like 2 years ago, but it's now out on PS4 and he's loving it on there as well. So he'll play that for like half an hour or so, then he goes up for his bath, He has a bath every night, and every night he has to listen to the soundtrack to Snowman and the Snow Dog, which is one of his favourite movies. So it's always Anna's most played songs on Spotify. And then when he's listened to the right number of tracks on there, he'll get out of the bath, and then they go into his bedroom. He gets settled down for bed. Anna will read him the same story every night. Neither of them even need to look at the book. It's just the routine of going through that particular story, which recently changed. He picked a new story. That happened like 2 weeks ago, and he's now having that one every night, which is a massive, massive change. And that was because the stories all have they're the books that have like the little sound stuff, the buttons along the side where you can press the buttons to make the sounds happen. And the one that he'd had for years, the battery had run out and the sound stopped working. So he picked a new book, which is awesome because it just slotted straight into the routine as if nothing had changed, and he was completely comfortable with the change. And that's something he couldn't have done like a year, 2 years ago, which is really cool. Then Anna does Mr. Hand, which is where she does this with her hand and does a really gruff voice like this. And for some reason, Mr. Hand sings happy birthday to him every night, and then they have a chat about Andy's day. So it's it's the only way we can ever get him to talk about his day. So it's kind of like a recap of the day through Mr. Hand. If me and Anna try and do it, he doesn't want to know. He'll give us our usual limit of 3 questions, but for some reason he's happy to have a conversation with Mr. Hand. Probably because Mr. Hand doesn't have a face, and Andy doesn't like faces, so he can have quite a long conversation with Mr. Hand. So they'll talk about what he's done that day, remind him of the places he's gone, the things that he's done, and he might share some stuff with Mr. Hand as well. And then he settles down to go to sleep, and Anna goes and sits on our bed and waits for him to go to sleep. She used to have to lie down on his bedroom floor. Again, up until just a few months ago, she was still lying down on Andy's bedroom floor for like half an hour to an hour every night waiting for him to go to sleep. But just recently, again, he's happy for her to sit on our bed. And now the half hour to an hour of her being there and him constantly checking is 15-20 minutes of her sitting on the bed. He can't see her, he can't check, he goes to sleep quicker, she gets to come down quicker. It's changing subtly, and all the changes are led by Andy, but they're all very, very positive. And of course it's still a very structured routine, it's just one that's changing. Has Andy ever decided to change a part of his routine completely spontaneously for no apparent reason? There's a few examples of that straight off the top of my head. I guess the most obvious one is one day he just decided he wasn't going to school anymore. His routine for years had been he would get up and go to school, and just one day he decided he wasn't going. So that was a pretty spontaneous routine change. It lasted a long time. Not filming recently. We've talked about that quite a lot in the vlogs recently, how he's no longer filming everything when he's out and about. That's a massive change because he, for the longest time, he wouldn't leave the house at all without his 2DS. So that he could film with it, and then it became his camera, but he would not walk out that front door without some kind of camera in his hand, whereas now he doesn't film, doesn't need the camera, doesn't care. So that's a massive routine change as well, and there's little examples of it all the way through. We talked about a few changes to his nighttime routine that are just random spontaneous things. How far in advance does Andy plan the things he wants to do? He'll plan them for as long as it takes us to go and do them. So once he knows we're doing something, in fact, it depends. If it's something we've told him we're going to do, we try and give him as much notice as possible so that he can plan it in detail. So like with Blackpool, we gave him like 6 weeks notice that we were going. So he was able to really get to know Blackpool using the internet. But there's other stuff that is his idea. So like when we went to Stamford earlier on in the summer holidays, and he'd had a whole route planned around the town, he'd probably only planned that for a day, but he told us he wanted to go there. And he'd planned the route that he wanted to do, and he would have kept planning it for weeks if we hadn't have gone, but he was adamant that he wanted to go there, so we just went. So it was only like a day. So once he decides he wants to do something, he will be completely focused on it and plan nothing but that until we go, even if it's months, and I mean months later. Like Goose Fair in Nottingham in October, he's already started thinking about. So he'll be planning that now until we go, which is like still 6 weeks away. And he's been talking about that for a couple of months already. Whereas there could be, like, we're going into town later today and we only told him about that yesterday, and he'll plan what he wants to do while he's there. So it varies according to the trip, but he'll just plan until he goes. What's the best way you found to introduce something new into Andy's routine? Give him as much notice as possible and just act like it's completely non-negotiable. So, for example, getting him back to school, it wasn't, we weren't begging him to go back to school, we weren't negotiating with him. It was very much a case of, when we reach this time, the TV goes off and then you go to school. And we told him about that for weeks before the back to school day. And it was the same with stuff like baths, teeth cleaning, having his hair washed. He hates having his hair washed. He has that done like 3 nights a week. And we just tell him when that's happening and it's not negotiable. And he accepts when stuff is not negotiable and we just do it. I think trying to sneak stuff in or try to bargain with him to get stuff into his routine doesn't work at all. He's very, very black and white. If it's part of the plan and we give him enough notice and enough reminders that it's part of the plan, he'll then be more distressed about it coming out of the plan than he will about the thing. So it then becomes, even with something like washing his hair, if he knows he's washing his hair on a Tuesday and we try not to wash his hair on the Tuesday, that will distress him because he's expecting to have it washed, even though he hates having it washed. But because it's part of the plan, because he's planned it all out, knows to expect it, it has to happen. So yeah, we just kind of put stuff in and make sure he knows it's not negotiable. Would it affect Andy if he didn't see me vlogging every day, or does he see it as part of my routine? Again, I don't think Andy pays any attention to what I do as part of his routine. Obviously he knows I'm making videos. One of the current working theories for why he's not filming as much is because he's worked out he doesn't need to, because I'm filming most of it and he can watch it on this channel. But I don't think there are days today, for example, once a week when we do the Parenting Autism videos, I don't touch a camera in the house. He doesn't see me do any vlogging. It doesn't bother him. He knows there's going to be a video coming out at 5 o'clock every day, and at 5 o'clock every day he is sat there waiting for my video to come out. So it would bother him if it got to 5 o'clock and he didn't see one of my videos come out. But he doesn't need to be in them, and he doesn't know what they're all about. He understands that sometimes I record them out here, sometimes I go away to a faraway city and record them there, but he'll still be there 5 o'clock every day checking that they've released, even if it's something that doesn't interest him and he doesn't watch them. He won't have watched this video to this point through, but he'll have watched the first 2 minutes just to check it out, just to see what it's about, and then he'll maybe skip through to see if it gets more interesting. No, it's still him just sat out in his garage. I will give this one a miss, but he'll always check it out. And that is your lot. Have I managed to actually fit this into a reasonable length episode this time? I think we're less than half an hour, which is awesome. As ever, if you feel like there's a question about routine that we haven't answered, then use the comments below to let us know what you'd like to know on this topic. We're never against going back and doing a part 2 on any of these episodes. In fact, at some point we are going to need to run back through all the topics again and do a season 2, because we are slowly running out of topics. So again, use the comment section to suggest topics that you'd like to see us do on this series as well. But other than that, keep an eye on the community page midweek, where I'll be announcing the new topic and you can ask your questions for next week's video. And if you have enjoyed this one, please make sure you leave a nice big thumbs up on there for me. Subscribe to the channel for more daily vlogs, and thank you very much for watching.